can't try to play defense, can't look at the tech folks. They've got to get up and help the board members, help the superintendents find the words to explain this to the community and to editorial boards and the Chamber of Commerce. So a couple of things here. One, the most powerful thing, I think, is the mental boxes people put stuff in. Metaphorically, as long as they think of technology differently than other stuff, you wind up with this problem that Laura alluded to. So give them the language, give them the examples, explaining that what we're seeing with technology has always happened, and it's just part of what happens when we try to raise children, but we can do it smarter and not as smart. Two, we've got to explain that there's real trade-offs. That kids are going to grow up in a world where being digital citizens is part of being citizens, and we can't pretend that's not the case, and we instead need to help kids understand what it means to be responsible. And just like kids pull fire alarms, and just like kids slash tires, we have to do that. We have to minimize the risk. We have to make sure there's consequences, but we can't kind of turn our eyes away from it. And third, educators can't feel victimized by this. We need to find those educators in schools who get how this stuff helps, and they need to get out front and push back so that that's the face of the profession, rather than kind of the teachers who say no smartphone policy.
Quick. Yeah, go ahead. Yes.
Holly Sagas, Florida Virtual School. So what we did, because in Florida, because we never thought we would be able to get a hold of or ahead of the policies, with the restrictions on this and that. So we actually wrote a social media course and got it approved by our DOE. And so now, we've just kind of bypassed all of that. And so now the kids are learning how to be responsible using social media and just all the new digital technologies that are out there. So that's, an opportunity as well.
Is that available to everyone who uses Florida Virtual, or just to your Florida students?
I think it's available to everyone.
Okay.
So we just launched it, so sometimes we do a beta first.
Right.
But yeah.
Oh, good.
Thank you. How do folks find it online, Holly?
flvs.net.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And it's just there on the homepage or something?
Well, you got to click through to get to courses, but you'll find it.
Great.
It's pretty intuitive.
Oh. So Holly was just saying that this social media course is available on the Florida Virtual site, not on the homepage, but if you click through to course offerings, and people don't need to subscribe to go see this, right? Anybody can go check this out. Or
I think you can see the course description, but if you want to actually take the course, you have to log in and sign up for it. Yeah.
Go ahead.
One question, Matt, back in Wisconsin. Question more towards the cognitive science approach. The training, you talked a lot about that this morning, and getting your team, your system, understanding the learning process through the foundation. Do you have examples of schools who have successfully been able to really look at the learning, the metacognition, the thinking, cognitive sciences?
Well, that's a good question.
your Wisconsin example, the higher ed in Wisconsin.
Well, yeah, in higher ed, there are examples. So, for University of Wisconsin at Milwaukee, not in Madison, but Milwaukee, actually got engaged in a randomized controlled trial looking at, computer-based interventions that are tied to both skill data but also motivation. And so they were reading deeply, and they did the controlled trial, and they launched that out, and off they went. A number of the very good schools.
Say a bit about what they did.
What they did was they used learning management system data about students, and they used that to then proactively send a note to faculty members to say, this student might be having trouble with this. You might send them an email like that, where you actually give them a template that includes motivation pieces as well as some substance, which they can then edit and get out and all that kind of stuff. But they designed it to match up with what was going on, the combination of both cognitive issues and motivation issues, and out they went. And they're now in the middle of an IES, Institute of Education Sciences, multi-center trial, trying to see if they can replicate that in multiple places. A number of the really good schools that we talk about in the book, whether it's Carpe Diem or Rocket Ship or Summit, etc., in an informal way, a lot of these places already are on their way to understanding better how learning works. But to be honest, unless you know one, Rick, I don't know of any school system right this second that has, undertaken a program of instruction around learning science, real learning science, and then become learning engineers themselves. Inside Kaplan, we're just finishing training several hundred instructional designers to be learning engineers. And so, we've gone through, the process of building the course to get them through and putting them through projects so they can apply it. And now we're going to see if they actually apply it. And frankly, within the book, you'll see we have references to a number of really great resources. One of the best of them is a book by Ruth Clark and Richard Mayer. Richard Mayer. How many here people know who Richard Mayer is? There's like one hand from somebody who's walking by. So I'm going to try this just for fun. Okay, how many people here know who Eric Clapton is? Okay, but
How about John Mayer?
so brother, no. Okay, so how many people here know that Eric Clapton is a guitarist? Hands, let's see. How many people here actually are rock guitarists? So you cheated. No. So, but think about that, right? So Richard Mayer is the most quoted living learning scientist in the world. So he's like Eric Clapton to learning scientists. Anything he writes gets published. Any talk he wants to give, he goes in. There are groupies of Richard Mayer. He's the nicest, quietest. He doesn't like any fuss, right? So he's not like Eric Clapton, right? But he is the equivalent of Eric Clapton to learning. None of you have to be learning scientists to know one of the greatest living learning scientists who has generated decades of research, careful research, on how do media and text and the structure of instruction help or hinder learning. Not that this is a big deal to me, mind you, but it's really weird. Think about our whole industry. Room after room of people. I did this, there was a conference held at Harvard by Eric Grimson, the chancellor of MIT, and some senior folks from Harvard. They dragged in provosts from the top 50, 100 universities all across the US looking at this problem of what do we do with virtual education when we have a brick and mortar institution. And I asked the same question of, 200 of the best provosts and all this, all concerned. They don't know who these guys are, right? So this is a problem, right? So I'm sorry, I went off on a rant. Great book. Richard Mayer, Ruth Clark, E-Learning and the Science of Instruction. This may have relevance. And it lays out, it's a guide for people who want to build instruction. It's not a wonky policy tome. It's really synthesizing the research, and then it says, this is what you do. This is how you should design and think about this. So for this audience, this is a great thing to be looking at and thinking about. For brick and mortar instructors, it actually is just as useful because the learning science is absolutely top notch. In other words, how does learning work? You may have to draw some of your own implications for, therefore, what should I be doing at a blackboard? But it's actually, that's exactly what you do. You say, wow, I should stop lecturing because I need kids to spend 80% of their time actually practicing and feedback and all this because that's how learning works. So you can extrapolate from this, and there's more references like that. So that would be something. Sorry?
Could you repeat the book name?
Yes, it's E-Learning and the Science of Instruction, and it's by Ruth Clark and Richard Mayer, M as in mother, A-Y-E-R.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Katie Ford. I am a public school parent and also a communications consultant that works in the education field. And you talk about technology is something that can be used for either good or evil. I think parents, similarly,
Can be used for good or evil?
can be used for evil when it comes to either supporting the kind of transformation that we're talking about in a positive way or preventing it from happening. But I will tell you, I go to a lot of these events and almost zero time is spent focused on how to engage parents in this movement. Why do you think that is, and how do we solve that problem?
So whatever, when we designed K-12 Inc. in the early years back in 2000, it was entirely focused on parents because they were the instruments by which instruction would happen in reading and math and science and art and music and history for a 6-year-old. The kids just couldn't spend that much time with technology, so off we went. So they were part of the learning environment, and I think, we talk about this in the book, is if you're really going to think like a learning engineer, you have to think about everything that affects the child and decide what is the full learning environment. Some of you will be unable to think of your parents as a part of the learning environment because it's too chaotic or there's all kinds of other issues or language and you just have to say, I got to do it otherwise. Others of you may be able to say, for some or all of your students, your parents are a part of the learning environment, in which case the learning engineering says they are part of your technology. So what should they do? What are they best able to do? What is your, tablet best able to do? What is your web browser best able to do? And you know what? What are they called? Books, right? Books, yeah. What is a book best able to do, right? Because books are great technology. They're low power, they work in low light conditions, they're pretty robust when you drop them. If books had not been invented, Kaplan would have had to invent them. I'm just saying, right? They're powerful technology, right? So,
but they're limited, right? The problem is you write a book, you have to write to a modal audience.
Yes.
Which means that, so that they're non-customizable. The problem is that
they don't use audio.
The iterative feedback loop on getting information and reissuing that book is a matter of years rather than a matter of... So, it's interesting, right? One of the things that I find useful when I'm trying to work with especially folks in districts is like the more you actually get them, not just to think about the book as learning technology as kind of a cute laugh line, but understand that actually the book is the predicate for everything we're talking about. And the question is, learning technologies add features, they add customizability, that actually is an intuition that's pretty intuitive to most teachers.
So just for fun, let's now talk about parents as learning technology. Okay, well, again, let's assume they're engaged. Well, they're adaptable, right? This whole artificial intelligence thing, what about human intelligence? That's kind of cool, right? It's pretty good compared to AI, as I understand it, right? They know their kids, right? And so it's like, wow, they can really personalize this stuff. Maybe not so hot with the data thing, but you can, give them enough guidance and they can rock with it. And the other thing they got is they love their children. And they are in this for the long haul. Right? And so if you ask them to do stuff that makes sense for the long haul, and again, not for all kids, but for a lot of kids, you can really get those folks cranked up. But again, the point is, just like any other technology, it can't be incoherent with the rest of what you're asking them to do. If you send them materials to learn a 5-step process for writing, while your teacher is teaching a 4-step process for writing, what do you think? Right? No engineer would do that. You'd say, what is the research on writing? What are the best techniques for it? What is my technique for it? Now, all my technologies, how can I use them? I got parents, all right? How do I use them in that writing process for feedback or something else? Because they can read, my gosh, think of that. Parents read really well. They can interpret, they can get meaning out of what they read. No technologies can do that. And they don't cost a lot. They kind of exist for most of us, right? So it's incredibly valuable technology, tool, if you will, and we should be designing either with them or have a specific reason to say, I just can't rely on them. Because if you get it wrong and think you can rely on them and you can't, that's also going to be a problem for the kids.
And there's about at least three reasons that this doesn't happen. One is when we were at these gatherings and these conferences, people tend to talk about what they can control. So there's just, and this is one reason why people love to talk about policy. Because it's really hard to change what happens in classrooms, but we can change what the law says. And parents just seem kind of out there, and so we've kind of just set that aside, and it's been a huge problem. A second is for reasons that continue to escape me. We have made the national conversation for more than a decade entirely about schools that suck. High poverty communities and schools that persistently, where lots of kids can't read or do math. And that's a huge problem, but it's also only about 20 or 25% of schools or families. What we've basically done is consigned to the sidelines 70 or 75% of families, and our conversations just don't actually have very much to say to those parents. And then a third piece is, look, parents have an enormous amount of time with their kids. They want to be invested in their kids. They want to do things with their kids that actually aren't part of the modern reform conversation. They want their kids to play instruments and enjoy art and read for fun and be in athletics. And because we have driven our conversation almost entirely around closing achievement gaps in reading and math, we have kind of said all those things are on the shelf until we fix this other stuff. So frankly, when we talk about what parents can do with technology, how parents can engage with kids, what we as educators have said to them since 2001 has had little or nothing to what many parents care about. So we've had this profound disconnect.
Another aspect of the parenting, you got us started here on this thing. This is good. There's actually a lot. One of the challenges for parents, is they don't know anything about learning either, and so they have all these misconceptions. Well, my kid.
You guys are all experts. We all went to school.
Well, right. That's. We all feel like we're experts, right? Because we went to school, right? We learned. So how hard can it be?
And nowadays we all get a 3.0 or better, so we must be good at it.
We must be good at it, right? Part of the problem is there is no communication flow to parents. Think how easy it is now as a medical patient to find pretty good information about your condition, right? You can go to the National Institutes of Health. I mean, you can go to places that are crazy, but you can go to places that are really trying hard to interpret the real stuff so that you can walk in better informed, and physicians gain by that, patients gain by that. We don't yet have the same kind of resources about learning for parents. And there's some very basic things that if you mess them up, it's very hard for your kids. So one of the basic ones is my kid talented at math or not? Is my kid a talented writer or not? Well, that's the wrong question, because this is the Anders Ericsson work. It's not really about being born as a writer or a math person at all. It's the work that goes into it. And both kids and their parents, the parents in a well-meaning way will say, wow, this is really hard for you. Maybe you shouldn't be doing this. Why don't we find something that's easy for you to do, because that would mean you're good at it. But that's not how learning works. That anyone who is going to become an expert ends up at the edge of struggle for years. That's how you become an expert, right? Well, we have to communicate that to parents. Another thing that happens is they'll walk into an active classroom where the students are engaged with problem solving and trying to work something out together and going up to blackboards, and the teacher is kind of guiding but is on the side. And parents will say, that's a bad classroom. Why is this teacher not talking to my students? My kid is not learning from this teacher. My kid is just talking to random people. So again, now there are classrooms that are badly done, right, that look almost the same to somebody who doesn't know what to look for as classrooms that do that exactly right. Well, we've got to explain that to our parents as we make these changes. One of the jobs of a learning engineer, I got asked, it's in the book as well, there's a master's program in learning science and engineering that has just opened up at Carnegie Mellon. It's very cool. And so they asked me, in part, how can I say this? They said, who would you hire, is what they basically said, right? And so I started to lay out the obvious things, I said to me about learning science. And then I said, they have to be great marketers. And it was like, really? Why? For this reason. You've got to explain what you did as an engineer to the people who are supposed to buy off on this thing, and that includes the users. So if you can't get it down to a couple of sentences about why is this the right thing, even though it looks completely different, you're going to miss the sale, you're going to miss the use case, you won't get support. And we don't do enough of that, none of us do. And that's a part of, especially virtual educators, got to spend some time thinking through, why is this better for learning? And then how do I explain that to parents, that it's not because it's cool and new and uses the iPad you got them for Christmas, it's because it's actually better for learning, and here's why. Is that fair?
Yeah.
You gentlemen are great students of history. What does the crystal ball say about the future of public education specifically? What's the chance that we'll be able to reform from within, despite these incredible examples that we've had of isolated instances?
Clay Christensen
Would you repeat the question? So what's
the
future?
What's the likelihood that these isolated happy examples will reflect a broad-based kind of happy transformation of American schooling in 20 years? In Clay's work, you guys all know his stuff with Michael, but it was built on Clay's work on The Innovator's Dilemma back in the 90s. And one of the things Clay pointed out was how frequently dominant players in industries got displaced by small, scrappy upstarts. Personally, Clay and I had this conversation. I think he misunderstands how it applies to the public sector. So I am far less sanguine than he that change would or will inevitably come. But I think that's an important truth. The average life, here's a useful factoid. The average lifespan of a Fortune 500 company in the U.S. from birth to dissolution is about 50 years. Of the nation's 25 biggest companies, 3/4 didn't even exist in 1965. What that means is that it's usually not amalgamated copper and iron that figures out how to become Bethlehem Steel, and then figures out how to do, rebar. What happens usually is organizations grow up, and this is as old organizational stuff, Arthur Stinchcomb and these guys from 60, 70 years ago. Organizations that succeed in any given era succeed because they have a workable, sensible combination of talent. They use the technology well. They build a culture. They're focused on doing something that clients and society find beneficial. And the more successful they are, the more wedded they get to their way of doing business. And you build a culture around that. And you have salary schedules. And you have 52-year-old vice presidents of manufacturing who get these, snot-nosed 26-year-olds who think they know things. And they tell them to wait their place and relax. And when these executives at places like IBM have these upstart Harvard dropouts come by with some new, software in 1979. And they say, well, that's not really what we do. We don't want to buy it. We'll lease it from you. And so these upstarts start in a garage and they start a company and they call it something like Microsoft. And they lease it to IBM. And they wind up with tens of billions of dollars and hundreds of rocket scientists in 1990 trying to figure out how to leverage this new thing called the internet. But they already know what they know how to do. Microsoft's advantage is that they built things like Excel